Good evening. That was just for the camera, though. So, how is everybody doing today? Yes. The general impression I got from the midterm is that people thought it was not too bad. Huh? Well, just wait for the exam. It's okay. Everybody should send David Gilbert a thank you note because, he was the one who was saying through the whole process, we need to make sure it's not too hard. We need to make sure it's not too hard. So, yes. So, our agenda for today. Yeah, last week we missed the lecture because of extenuating circumstances. But we do need to make up that time. So, today we are going to, instead of doing a lab, do all of the lecture from last week and this week. That's what we're going to do. Any objections? Good. So, last night I was feeling a little under the weather. I was coughing all night. That's going to be one of those.
It feels like it come down with bad.
Well, you see, it's actually kind of funny. A couple of years ago, I did have a trip to Transylvania as an academic. I was going to do an academic conference, and that's actually completely true. I was actually in Transylvania. I thought I had gotten all of my shots, but as you can see.
So is the accent played up, or do they actually all sound like that?
Actually, they all sound like that.
That's pretty funny.
It's kind of funny, yeah, it's hilarious. If you actually go to Romania, like, it's pretty close to, like, the Hollywood Dracula accent, even, like, the comedy end of it.
This makes me happy.
Yeah, like, it was kind of funny, when we were in Transylvania, we went to go and visit a zoological museum, which, it's not a zoo, it's a zoological museum, which means it's all taxidermied and animals preserved in jars of formaldehyde, which is a great thing to go visit if you're in Transylvania, right? And, like, there was this guy who, like, works there. It's, like, free admission, even, and because it's, like, kind of just a thing the university does. And, like, so there's this guy who's, like, a grad student or something, and he sees that we're, like, the only foreigners there, looking at the animals. And he's like, would you like to see the vivarium? And I'm like, yes. So we have to walk down, like, this very narrow, wrought iron spiral staircase that's caged in, right, down into the basement, where they have several large iguanas and, some snakes and stuff like that. A vivarium is a place where the living things are. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. If I may make a recommendation, though, don't look and sound like an American in Eastern Europe. Not a great idea.
That's why you wear a Canadian flag.
I know, but the best I could manage is to kind of like look a little British with a little bit of a British-looking hat. But,
My hot take is that if you go out wearing a Canadian flag, so many Americans do it lately that people are just going to look at you and just say, oh yeah, it's probably an American. So don't make it obvious that you're Canadian. Just if it comes up, just mention it.
The locals were like walking up to us and taking our pictures.
Why don't we want to be recognized as an American?
I mean,
Because
well,
Americans have a bit of a bad rep.
American tourists are generally known to be a bit unpleasant in Europe.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even, you're not even necessarily talking about, like you are talking about Europe, but like Eastern Europe is a very specific thing. You're talking about a country that was only like liberated from the Soviets in like the mid-80s. So like anybody who's kinda like middle-aged, like Americans are like not, that's a no-go zone, alright? Yeah, but anyway. Anyway, that's my experience of traveling there. I'm sure yours would be different. Yeah, apparently I've heard from my Italian relatives that as long as you stick to big cities, you're probably okay. But which is kind of the opposite of what you'd expect. Like the problem was that like we were at a town called Cluj-Napoca, which is the actual former capital of Transylvania. And like it's sufficiently away from like the major metropolitan areas that like a person who passes as American is quite a rare sight out there, you know? So, but yeah, anyway. So yeah, it was quite the trip. Actually, I had wild boar for the first time. That was fun. So, relationships. We're going to be talking about relationships, cardinality, and business rules. That's the trick to the Dracula accent, is you really have to lean into the ooh, you know. So, I won't do it the whole time. Don't worry, guys. So, relationships. A relationship is an association between entities. In this case, we're not talking about romantic relationships. For example, a province has many patients living in it. Province is an entity, patients is an entity. They exist in a relationship between the two of them. Each patient lives in one province, but each province will have many patients. We've already we've talked a bit about one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many before. So, for example, each department is managed by one employee, and an employee may only manage one department. This relationship is one-to-one. Cardinality is the number of entity occurrences possible on the two sides of a relationship. When we say one-to-one or many-to-many, the term for that is cardinal. Since, as everybody saw in the midterm yesterday, nomenclature is testable on tests. So, professors teach classes. However, professors do not teach all classes, right? Although a professor can teach many classes, the number of classes that a professor may teach is essentially capped at 4, although this is not universally the case. If you take a look at a professor like Kevin Brown, who's often teaching like 5, maybe 6 different classes. It really depends, right? Like you can squeeze in quite a few 3-unit classes, right? But anyway, so this rule that a professor may not teach more than one class, or a professor may not teach more than 4 classes, it's not a thing that is natively enforced by the database, right? Because how would the database know that? We have to program the database to know that. This type of constraint is known as a business rule. So, when we're talking business rules, we're not talking about things like a business is a business, you know, which is like, that's one of my favorite like businessisms. Businessism. A business is a business. A business must make money. It's like, yes, congratulations, you have discovered tautologies, business majors. So, let us consider symbols which may be used in entity relationship diagrams. I did actually bring the lightsaber today. So, the crow's foot end here, that's what that's called, is crow's foot. That denotes many. An ode denotes 0. A line denotes 1. So, 0 crow's foot corresponds to 0 or more. Line crow's foot indicates 1 or more. You all remember the difference, I hope, between the star, well, actually, you guys haven't done regular expressions. What am I even talking about? Anyway, I think they mentioned this briefly in Java. The cardinality of class associations follow similar rules. So, you know, if you want something to plug this into, it is definitely UML diagrams as seen in Java. So, basically here, any relationship at all is optional, right? 0 is a valid value. Here, at least one thing must be related, right? With these, down here, 1 to 1 means precisely and exactly 1, right? 1 to 1. 0 to 1 is still a 1 to 1 relationship, but null is a valid value, right? So basically that's another way to interpret the O here is, can it be null? If that's a 0, then yes. Does that make sense? Good. Shall we look at some examples? So, 1,4 means that a professor must teach a minimum of 1 class, which is, by the way, not actually true. Sometimes professors are given release from teaching from a whole semester in order to do development work on classes. Not that I don't love you guys, but like, holy hell, I want some time to fix these courses. This one, you know, this one also needs a little bit of work, but it's not quite as bad as I thought it was, like, going into it, but, I mean, some of the labs are a little, you know, useless.
Do you think it's not great that we had to wait so long to actually start writing SQL from scratch, personally?
So, this is actually, like, pedagogically, and I hate the term, but because you're not children, it's, you know, anybody who uses the word pedagogy to discuss you guys is using a misnomer. The correct term is andragogy. But I should teach you something, and you should practice it within a few days if you want the concept to solidify. Which means that, ideally, the labs should cover the material that was covered in lecture in the same week. Particularly because I believe there's a scheduling constraint that the lab must occur after the lecture. So, yeah, that would be like the first step I would take. But also, I think the slides waste some time as well. But like, in general, it's not the worst course I've seen.
I've definitely seen way more bloated slides.
Yeah, so. We can improve it though. We can rebuild it. We have the technology. So, at any rate, a professor teaches between 1 and 4 classes, but a class may only be taught by 1 professor, which is also not quite true, but there are, in a couple of faculties, sometimes they'll take the lecture section and the lab section and give them to different people, although they're not supposed to do that, but so it goes. Considering our community hospital database, you may notice that in all of these cases, we have the same crow's foot symbol present. This is a mandatory one-to-many relationship. So, a province must have at least 1 patient to be in the database. One might argue whether that's actually a useful thing. Perhaps we should have all provinces in the database, even if there are no current patients. That might be a bad example. Physicians must have at least 1 encounter. Physicians must be assigned to at least 1 admitted patient. Again, maybe that's not, maybe that doesn't actually make logical sense. Certainly, it doesn't make sense in the case of patients and unit dose orders. You can certainly be a patient in the hospital and not be on any medication, particularly as there's a period, when you're admitted to a hospital before they give you medication. So it's not like, it's it's another one of these Monty Python sketches, right? It's like, hello, I just broke my arm. All right, here's some medicine. What's it for? It doesn't matter, it's necessary for the database. Here you go. Yes. Yes. Are there any of these that I agree with? That's a good question. Nursing units have at least 1 admission. I'm not sure I agree with that. A nursing ward could be empty. Take, for example, a maternity ward. It is entirely possible that nobody is having a baby at a particular moment. You still need a ward for it, right? Let's see. Departments have at least 1 purchase order. I'm not sure I agree with that. It's possible to have a department that hasn't ordered anything, right? Oh goodness.
Provinces have many patients?
A patient may have at least 1 admission. This is one I agree with, right? In order to be a patient in the hospital, you need to have been admitted with something. You are not admitted, or you're not a patient of the hospital until you have been admitted for something. So that one, I would agree, is a true, the symbol here is correct. In most other cases with this diagram, I may quibble. I'm a great quibbler, as I'm sure you all know.
So then, to be more correct, we got to change the line to be like that circle.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. So, as you can see, if we make the diagram a little bit more specific, many of these relationships are now properly represented. This is going to be impossible for people at the back of class to read. Let me just, there you go. So, take for example here, actually this one that, the one thing that I thought would be appropriate for not being optional, turns out to be optional. Considering patients and admissions, it makes sense that each admission corresponds to only 1 patient, right? When you would, well, except what if you admit a woman and then she gives birth? In that case, you then have 2 patients, but 1 admission, unless you count the moment of birth as an admission event in the database. Which I'm not sure that you should or could, because admissions usually occur at an admissions desk,
Yeah.
right? Not to mention, like, the child may not even have a name. This is quite common. People often don't name their children immediately after they're born, right?
How do the
People,
hospitals handle side visas?
wow, this got very Halloween all of a sudden.
Do they just like?
I would count brains if it were me,
Okay.
you know, but
That's how we count a life, is upon brain death, not when the heart stops beating, but it's more complicated than that.
yeah, it turns out that the line between life and death is a little more fuzzy than you might. So, yeah, so basically, this is kind of the way that these types of relationships go. It's like, okay, I think this makes sense, but now, because I'm a bit pedantic, I can think of this, I can think of this this exceptional case, so maybe we need to loosen up the relationship a little bit to account for this case, right? It is perhaps true that, each unit dose order should be associated with exactly 1 medication. I'll agree with that one, right? If you're assigning someone multiple medications, you can assign them multiple unit dose orders, but each unit dose order is for only 1 medication. That one, I will give you. Okay, any questions about this? All right. Right, so, let's talk about degree. Oh, and by the way, because this is like fully lecture, at some point in the middle we'll have a break, okay? Normally when it's a lab period, I don't give you a break because my assumption is if you need to go to the bathroom, you just go to the bathroom, right? So, unary relationships have 1 entity. It is a relationship from an entity to itself, right? So, consider a table of employees, right? Imagine you have a column in the table of employees designating who an employee is supervised by, right? This is a relation back into that same table of employees, right? It's like, if employee 1, 2, and 3 all have employee 4 as their value for I am supervised by, then employee 4 is like just the next entry down in the same table. That's a unary relationship. Unary relationship. This is sometimes also known as a recursive relationship. Anybody scared by the term recursion? A little bit, good. So you know about it then.
I was until you explained it to me like previously.
Yeah, so recursion is a very, very important but kind of highly abstract mathematical thing you can do with code. All the best algorithms are recursive. And I mean that like in an actual like technical mathematical sense. Recursion allows you to perform divide and conquer algorithms such as quicksort and merge sort, which are the best sorting algorithms. Recursion in a programming language sense just means a function which calls itself, right? So basically the way that the quicksort algorithm works, or well, let's do merge sort because it's a bit easier. This is how merge sort works. You take an array, chop it in half, and then you call merge sort on both halves of the array, right? And then you chop those in half again, and you call merge sort on those, chop in half, chop in half, chop in half, until the process of sorting becomes trivial, which is probably like if your array only contains one element, then sorting that element is trivial because you just do nothing. And then part of the merge sort algorithm is how you recompose the two halves, right? Which is basically you go through them one at a time, assuming they're sorted, put them back in the order, that they, whichever one is least, you put that in first and you move through the two half arrays to form the big array. And by doing that, you are like, I know it doesn't seem like it's faster, but it is faster to do it that way. But yeah, anyway, enough data structures and algorithms. But yes, that's the general flavor of recursion. People will use it to mean different things in different contexts, but that's the context I just described to you is what it will mean for you the overwhelming majority of the time. A function that calls itself. You can do lots of cool things with it. So, binary relationships are relationships between two entities. Ternary relationships are relationships between three entities. A four-entity relationship has four entities, and you can go on and on. Ternary or higher relationships are normally represented by a series of binary relationships, although, if we take a look here, can anybody see a ternary relationship in this diagram? Well, so
Would it be unit dose order?
unit dose orders. Okay, so let's go back a bit. You may remember earlier on we said that when we're implementing a many-to-many relationship, there's no direct way to do it. Between two tables, we require a third table to keep track of that relationship, right? You can always tell these in the diagram because they are the terminus points of, all of the crow's feet, right? So unit dose orders is a way of relating many patients to many medications, right? So the unit dose orders table, while technically an entity because it is a table, it's a table that's being used to implement a many-to-many relationship, right? So this, really, if you put on your thinking cap, it's a binary relationship between patients and medications. So, knowing that, can you see anywhere in this diagram that we have a ternary relationship? Anybody care to guess?
I may, but I don't know if it's correct. Departments, vendors, and items.
Departments.
Because purchase is
Purchase
not
orders?
really, but it's not really. It will happen the same thing with unit dose orders because it's the same thing, right? It's just a entity that is in between to implement a many relation, right?
Yeah. This one's a little strange and complicated in my opinion because I'm not sure I perfectly understand like what is intended by the relation between purchase orders and purchase order lines, right? But if you kind of like take that concept and like collapse it down, and I know it's like we're kind of like fudging the structure of the thing now, but if you kind of consider these to be one thing, then yes, purchase orders is a relationship between items, vendors, and departments, right? So that would be a ternary relationship. There's an easier one though. Admissions, right? An admission is a relationship between a patient, a physician, and a nursing unit. Right? Make sense? Good. We don't have anything of any higher order than that in this diagram. Good. So, relationship examples. A unary relationship is where the line comes out and hits the same table. Binary relationships between two entities. Ternary between three entities by means of a fourth table. Make sense? Good. Any questions? So, now let's talk about business rules. So, examples of business rules. An employee ID must be unique. How would we implement that?
Send out a key identity.
Yeah.
Declare a key as like.
Well, the database itself, it blocks you if you want to put the same number for an inverter that is already there, right?
So there is a unique constraint which you can use in various types of SQL systems. Primary key is like a unique constraint plus, right? So if you designate the employee ID as a primary key, which basically anytime you see ID, you probably should be making it. It's normally either a primary key or a foreign key, right? So yeah, making this a primary key satisfies that business rule, right? Customer province must be valid. So not null, but also in a list of existing provinces.
Yeah, that would be like in like on or al or BC or whatever.
Yes. Yeah, you have a, the way that you would do this is you would write a check, right? Check, province, whatever, the identifier in, and then you provide an array of every valid province code, right? Or if you're keeping the provinces in a table, like a separate table, you could extract the province codes themselves using a select statement as a subquery, and then use in over that, right? That's maybe a little bit more dynamic, but the question is, how good is your system? Did you plan for the bringing into existence of new provinces, keeping in mind that states in the United States also have codes in the same system as provinces in Canada. So, if, for example, maybe something happens in the United States and you end up with North and South Texas, right? They're going to have to argue over what the codes should be, but did you write your system so that you could accommodate the addition of additional provinces or states in your system? Probably you didn't, because you were like, I live in a politically stable continent.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, no.
yeah, Probably enough said about that.
Wait till you get to East and West Texas.
East and West, actually, that's probably be more what it would do is East and West Texas. Because both of them would want a beach, right? Yeah. So, and besides, Texas is kind of too big to start with anyways for an American state, right?
Used to be bigger.
Yeah.
Don't ask about that line in Oklahoma.
Yes. I mean, honestly, they're always bragging about how big they are. It'd be kind of nice if someone cut them down to size, you know? So, anyway. Ontario's bigger, just saying. Yes. Patient height must be greater than 0. This should be fairly obvious how you would enforce it. Sorry, is that a question?
Oh no, I'm just judging, sorry.
Okay, yeah, no trouble. Patient height must be greater than 0. Hopefully everybody can see how you would put a check in for that. Hopefully everybody can see how patient heights less than 0 is a nonsense, right? A machine operator may not work more than 10 hours in any 24-hour period. That one is a little trickier, right? It's perhaps not completely obvious how you would enforce that. We'll get there. Reorder items when inventory falls below 5. That might also be non-obvious how you would get there.
So you will need conditions for the whole table, like something that constantly track, right?
We're actually going to solve these two using a thing called a stored procedure. We're going to, today, talk about how you can take SQL and you can embed a very simple procedural programming language in it. Yes, things are going to get complicated quickly. Yay! So, specifications that preserve the integrity of a conceptual or logical data model are business rules. So basically what we're trying to do is we are trying to disallow invalid data, right? The business rules are stored as part of the database. Now, this is a this is a more important point than you may originally think, right? Up to this point, we have been primarily, in this class at least, using databases in and of themselves. We interact with the database using a database management system. But, here's the thing, cats and kittens. Really, in practical terms, most of the time, you guys will be writing programs to interact with databases, not interacting with them directly. We're going to be getting into this in PHP reasonably soon, right? You guys will be getting into this in .NET by the end of the semester, right? Integrating a database into a broader program is much more useful than just having access to a database. For one thing, thou shalt never expect a normie to compose an SQL statement, right? And by normies, I mean people who don't program, which is, again, the vast majority of the people on the planet. What do you do for a normie? You write them a GUI, right? You make a nice little graphical user interface. You try to make it as user-friendly as possible. You know, the types of information that can be assumed, you assume, and you make it simple so that normal people can use it, right? Often, I make comments in the server-side class that most social media sites are just really front ends for database access. That's kind of like almost the entire point of them, right? So a good deal of what you folks might become employed doing is working on middleware that connects users to databases, right? So, given that we are going to be accessing the database from a program, we have a question that arises. If we wish to put in safety conditions, do we do that in the middleware layer or at the layer of the database?
Both.
That's a real question.
Well,
Both is the best answer. Very good job. So, more protection is better than less protection, right? But under no circumstances should you assume that the middleware layer completely protects the database. For one thing, once a database server has been set up, it can be accessed by more than one middleware layer, right? So your middleware might be fine and good and well written, but what was it, Dan Jr.? Dan Jr., the child who makes websites, right? From yesterday. Dan Jr., the child who makes websites, might write database access that is slightly less robust than what you've come up with. So, you build that protection in at the level of the database itself, right? Make sense? Good? Any questions? Okay. Business rules also help to standardize the company's view of data. That is to say, you may have noticed when I was discussing the ERD for the community hospital database, I had a lot of quibbles. Well, is this really true? Is that really true? Yada, yada, yada. In a real situation, those decisions wouldn't be given to me if I was working on this database. Those decisions would be made by the person who designed the database, and I would have to live with them, right? Once rules have been encoded, basically you get the, well, that's the way we do things here kind of thing. And I know it's like, as young people, that's the way we do things here is going to be like one of the barriers you hit quite early in your careers when working at real companies. It's like, well, why don't we do it this way? This way is better, because that's the way we do things here, right? The incentive to that's the way we do things here is that you can actually do a lot of damage by oscillating between different ways of doing things, right? It's a big deal actually to change over the way things are done, right? You can imagine the position of the poor junior developer who goes to all of the senior C++ developers and says, oh, you know what we should do? We should re-implement this whole thing in Rust, And they will say what deserves to be said to you. No, go learn C++, you child, right? Anyway, so there are 4 types of business rules. Number 1, entity integrity rules. These are the types of rules that make sure that the data inside of a piece of data inside of the database does not have an invalid value, right? Number 2, referential integrity. does my foreign key correspond to an actual used primary key? If I delete something with a primary key, what happens to all of the things that refer to that in other tables? These are referential integrity constraints. Domains are things like the height example before. Do you guys know what a domain is mathematically defined?
The range of things that are allowed.
Yes, it's the range of allowable values is the domain. So a domain rule is something like a professor must teach between 1 and 4 courses. The domain of courses a professor may teach is from 1 to 4. Exclusive. I wish. No. Exclusive on the upper bound, inclusive on the lower bound, please. Triggering operations. When we store a procedure, something must trigger that procedure. Those are triggered operations. You'll notice here we have operation, reorder items, when inventory falls below 5. Inventory falls below 5 is the trigger. Reorder items is the procedure. Make sense? Entity integrity. For example, each instance of an entity must have a unique identifier that is not null. So, assignment of things as primary keys, this is entity integrity. Enforcement of a field not being null, this is entity integrity. We're basically trying to make sure that the record contains all of the data that it needs to contain. Make sense? Any questions? Hopefully that's fairly straightforward. Referential integrity, rules governing the relationships between entities. So, again, if I delete an entry in a database and it has a primary key, what happens to all of the records in other tables with foreign keys referring to that ID? It also means not assigning values that are invalid in the first place. So, for example, if we have an insert statement into the purchase orders table for community hospital database, you'll notice that department ID is given the value of 11. Well, there is no department 11. There is a department 10. Another example, we can't delete a province that is used in patient or vendor records. So, delete provinces where province ID is equal to SK, Saskatchewan. If any patients hail from Saskatchewan, it is inappropriate to delete Saskatchewan from our table. And I would argue, why are you trying to delete Saskatchewan from the table anyway, unless, of course, Saskatchewan divides into east and west Saskatchewan, in which case the country looks even more like a piano.
No pictures for them.
It could just be annexed like Manitoba.
That's an interesting thought.
You would then update all your records, replace that, and then go with it.
Yes.
Wouldn't the constraint on the prevent you from doing the update, or
Yes. So this is what would probably result. let's examine this hypothetical where we now have East and West Saskatchewan, right? All of the patients in the table will have a province associated. It will be the old province, Saskatchewan. Presumably, all of the patients now find themselves as residents of either East or West Saskatchewan, right? So you can't update their provinces because that's not a province in the provinces table, right? So this is what you would have to do. You would have to add East and West Saskatchewan as entries to the province table, right? Presumably there's nothing preventing you from doing that. You're inventing these new, these new provinces that just came into existence. You then update all of the patient records with whether or not they are in East or West Saskatchewan for this brief period where you have East, West, and whole Saskatchewan in your table. Once all of the entries have been migrated to either East or West Saskatchewan, there will be no more patients whose province ID is Saskatchewan. At that point, you can remove Saskatchewan from the table. With that series of operations, you maintain referential integrity, and you are able to update the database with East and West Saskatchewan. So there you go. That's your procedure. Any other questions? That was a good question. Good. I do think that Manitoba it gets overlooked, and I think that Manitoba probably does if this were a video game, they'd have they'd be the one that has the army that's larger than you think, and it surprises you. They're kind of like the Dark Horse province,
When my partner was,
Yeah, exactly.
when my partner was getting PR, for the PR test, she had to list all the provinces in Canada, and Manitoba was the one she kept forgetting.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it'd be PEI, but no, it was Manitoba.
Who is he? Fred Penner is from Manitoba. Oh, he's a famous children's musician.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. If any of you currently or at any point have children, I recommend Fred Penner. He does really good children's music. When a foreign key constraint is specified, typically at table creation, and an onDelete or onUpdate parameter specifies what action to happen. There is an onDelete and onUpdate parameter that specifies what action happens to rows or columns in related tables. So, the choices are no action, cascade, set null, or set default. The default is no action. So, an easier way to understand what that just said, if you have an entry with a primary key and you delete it, what happens to the associated records with foreign keys corresponding to it? We have 4 options, and you can set this in the query. First, you have it stop, and it raises an error. This is no action. So no action is don't do it. Do not delete primary keys which are associated with foreign keys. Next, corresponding rows are deleted or updated in the related tables. Cascade. So if I delete the record with the primary, with the ID of 7, everything with a corresponding foreign key of 7 is also deleted. This can make sense in certain situations. For example, take the medications table. Let's say that a particular medicine is discontinued by the hospital, right? You probably want to also delete all dose orders corresponding to that medicine, because you no longer have that medicine, right? Now you should also inform the doctors that that's happened, right? There should be some kind of internal signaling system. But, right, it doesn't make sense to still have orders for a medication that's no longer carried by the hospital.
Well, don't hospitals usually have like an archive of like history that you might want to keep, like, okay, we did provide this medicine and this dose at like this time.
You are absolutely right. I am considering the unit dose orders to be a table of the currently active and open unit dose orders. If it's a history table, then no, absolutely not. You should not delete the history table. Yeah, very good. And like, one of your stored procedures might be something like put all of the day's active dose orders into the archive, like at midnight. That can be a stored procedure. Set null. Corresponding values are set to null in the related tables, or set default. Corresponding values are set to their default values in related tables. So you can also just reset the foreign key. Only appropriate in like 0 to many relationships. So, how are we doing for time?
10:30 right now.
Okay. Oh man. Okay, I'm gonna finish these slides and then we're gonna have our break, okay? I'll try to pick up the pace. So, this is a slide where it's asking you to perform it so that you can see the effect. I will leave that as an exercise to the reader. Domains are associated with constraints that restrict values permitted in a column. For example, patient height is greater than 0. Advantages: verifying values for an attribute during insert and update operations means that you don't end up with stinky bad values in your table. And you don't want stinky bad values in your table, generally speaking. It also ensures that operations down the line can make use of these constraints, right? If a patient height can never be negative, you don't have to worry about checking for that later on. Rules that are invoked on the action of data manipulation operations are triggering operations. Uses, for example, automatically generate derived column values. Maybe this column is supposed to be the sum of 2 other columns, right? Prevent invalid transactions. There might be some slightly more complicated way that an entry can be invalid, more complicated than this. You can trigger an operation. Enforcing complex security authorizations. Providing transparent event logging and auditing. As I said, keeping an archive of records in particular tables. Boom. Used as a last resort. If you can do it in a different way, do it in that other different way. Right? Try to keep the number of triggers and stored procedures to a minimum. Don't just, don't over-rely on them. When a required business rule cannot be enforced using the following integrity constraints, not null, primary key, foreign key, and check, to enforce the to enforce complex, yes. Isn't that exactly what it just said? Okay, all right. The slides might need a little work. Right, so, again, these are the 4 types of business rules. how are they implemented? These things that we talked about earlier. Employee IDs are unique, that's an entity integrity. That's entity integrity. Customer profits must be valid. What type is that? Correct. Patient's weight must be greater than 0. What type is that? Domain. Machine operator may not work for more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period. That's a trigger. Trigger warning. Reorder items when inventory falls below 5.
Trigger.
Yes. Good. Summary. Very good. And now that we're all sufficiently triggered, time for our break. Yeah. This lecture is going to suck. So, stored procedures. Stored procedures are supported by most database management systems. They are pieces of executable code stored in the database, that is, small programs. They are managed by the database management system. Examples of the sorts of things you can do with stored procedures. Archive last year's data. Maybe it's necessary for you to keep an archive. Maybe that archive needs to be updated quarterly, yearly, monthly, daily, whatever. Remove customers' data when the customer hasn't bought anything for more than 3 years. You can imagine that as a fairly, you can imagine it like a select state, or you can imagine a statement to do that, an SQL statement, right? The question is not the statement itself. The question is, when do you run it, right? Maybe, again, quarterly, you run through, you have a procedure that runs through the database and removes all data corresponding to this condition. Sure. They do a similar sort of thing with your Mohawk login credentials when you're graduated, right? At a certain point, your Mohawk ID won't get you into Canvas anymore. So, you know, if you think there's anything interesting in there, archive it, right? But like, that doesn't happen. Like, it's not like there's like, you know, the event of your graduation triggers the database operation. They do this probably at the beginning of each semester. They do a check for all of the students who've graduated and, you know, release those who have been graduated for X amount of time, something like that. Implementing a price change across a category of products. Sure. So, the purpose of stored procedures is to automate and standardize processes. Sure, you could have a database jockey go in every quarter and perform that update, type it in manually. Sure, you can pay a person to do that. But, as we know, humans are terrible. Worst things on the planet, human beings. I have nothing but complete and utter contempt for humanity as a vampire.
Bloodhound does this.
Yes. So, human beings cannot be relied upon to type things in the same way on different days, let alone, you know, every 6 months or something. So basically, this is like the next step for a programmer is like, oh, I wrote down the query I used last time to do this. It's like, well, if you wrote it down in the database system, right, you wouldn't have to have your little sticky note, basically, right? Stored procedures are compiled, therefore they are fast. So you write the procedure, it's a pre-compiled procedure, you don't have to compile it when you run it. They are usually written in a language called Transact SQL or TSQL. Can also be written in a common language runtime programming languages such as C#, Visual Basic, .NET, or PHP. The mere idea that you would write this in Visual Basic. My goodness. Does anybody know what Visual Basic is even used for?
Like a lot of access applications way back when and stuff like that.
Yes.
I write those sometimes.
It's the scripting language built into Microsoft Office products for scripting macros. It sucks. Visual Basic sucks. It's the, like, you know how there are bad languages and then there are bad languages? Visual Basic is a bad language. Don't use it if you can avoid it. Actually, I have
We
a...
have to benchmark it against JavaScript where.
Ooh. Well, like actually, I'm giving a POS committee meeting presentation at some point this month or next month. This month is almost over. Next month, the subtitle of this this talk is JavaScript is a real language now. So, yes,
Is QBasic a language?
I think it is. Yeah. So I want to show you the TIOBE index. So the TIOBE index is a measurement of programming language popularity. I would not call this like, I don't think this data is as strong as the Stack Overflow Developer Survey, because this is not based on industry professionals telling us what they use in industry. This is based on search engine results. So this weights very heavily towards the sorts of languages that are taught in schools, right? But nevertheless, somewhat interesting. You can see that Python has become quite popular in recent years. But you can see that Java is sort of falling off. This poor guy is actual honest-to-goodness C, just plain C. Now this is not representative of how much C is used. It's more representative of how much C is studied, right? This is C++. It's kind of a nice graph, right? C++, Python, yes. This one's C#. JavaScript, like the fact that JavaScript is down here and not up here, right? JavaScript is overwhelmingly the most popular language used for everything, right? But basically this means that everybody who uses JavaScript doesn't really study it, which is probably why it sucks, right? But I just want to point out this guy right there, VB, Visual Basic.
What happened in 2020?
You see this jump right there?
Yeah, what happened in 2020?
You want to know what happened? It was revealed that you can use Visual Basic to perform ransomware attacks.
Oh.
Whoa.
So interest in the language spikes up in 2020.
Right around April.
I wonder who was
Yeah.
it for those things.
Yeah, early 2020 too. Yeah, like. Let's not talk about early 2020. This doesn't exist. History started in 2023. Okay.
They still feel like 2020.
But, yeah, like, Object Pascal is not that popular, right?
Visual Basic is responsible for
Cause it spreads viruses.
Yes, that's what the historians 200 years from now will
Yeah.
figure
Okay.
out, like,
I think the historians 200 years from now will be like, why were they so obsessed with toilet paper back then?
I just want to point out that, like, according to this, the 11th most popular language is Fortran. Alright? Fortran. Do you guys know what Fortran is?
I think so.
It was originally coded on punch cards.
Oh, yeah.
It stands for Formula Translator.
What's the number one again? Oh yeah.
Python.
Is this because of LLMs?
What, Python going up?
Yeah, 'cause I know a lot of.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's, yes. I would, yeah, I think you're on the money with that. Because Python is like the language for AI, the language for machine learning. It's like there are only two types of people who use Python, right? Absolute beginners and data scientists. No in between, right? But yeah, that's probably all the buzz about AI. Python isn't the language for AI.
So relating back to the databases, like what
Yeah.
exactly is the difference between the TSQL and the SQL we're using?
Well, it doesn't look, TSQL doesn't look like SQL at all. Would you like to see it?
Sure.
And thank you for bringing us back on track. I do occasionally need that. I like to think that my tangents are interesting though. Yeah. Where are we here? So, again, the advantage of using TSQL is that you are embedding these procedures with the database. You can get to the same place by having your PHP or your C# do procedural programmatic stuff, but you know, it's better if the data, like, for example, a timing trigger, right? Are you going to rely on an exterior program to periodically, make a network call to your database to do some operation, or are you just going to get the database to do that itself? It's less network traffic, right? And like, you start introducing all kinds of concurrency issues that you really don't need to think about, right? Keep your life simple. Best practice is for programming languages to call stored procedures for database access. It executes faster, reduces network traffic, it's more secure, consistent, and it's DBA approved. I guess DBA is Database Administrator. So, SQL is non-procedural and set-oriented. Stored procedures require procedural code. Each database vendor extends SQL with a procedural language. Microsoft uses TSQL. Oracle uses Procedural Language SQL, PLSQL. IBM uses SQL Procedural Language, SQL-PL. And MySQL uses SQL/Persistent Stored Module, SQL-PSM. We've got Procedural Language SQL and SQL Procedural Language, which are two different languages. So we really have the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front going on here. That's a Monty Python reference for any of you out there. From Life of Brian, which I cannot recommend students watch because it contains nudity, as movies often did back in the 70s. If you're going to watch a Monty Python movie, watch Holy Grail. It has no nudity. Yes. There's a famous episode of Monty Python called Full Frontal Nudity, which doesn't actually contain full frontal nudity.
Ooh, the old Vegas one.
I think that's the one with the Spanish Inquisition in it. I
Oh,
could
that's
be
the
wrong.
meme?
Or no, it's the one with the parrot sketch. Anyway, yes, anyway. So, so everybody, I'm going to give you a great gift, alright? When people are being pedantic, right, you can now say, SQL is not a programming language, alright? You can say that. It's not SQL that is the programming language, it's TSQL that's the programming language. Base SQL is not Turing complete. It is not a programming language, right? So, here you go. Keywords in TSQL. Ignore that one. Just don't think of it. I want you to psychologically block from your mind the fact that it has a go-to. Actually, even Java has go-tos, but that still doesn't mean you should use them. I'm not going to read the list because we're going to go through a few of these. So, stored procedures are invoked by the execute function in TSQL. The exec is optional, but it's a good idea. It allows autocomplete to help. So you can run the procedure without the keyword, but the keyword tells the stupid, stinky Microsoft database management system what you're doing, so it might be able to provide you some help. They can accept command line parameters separated by commas. I'm not sure that I would call them command line parameters, as we will not be accessing them within a command prompt. Parameters may be positional or named. SQL Server provides many stored procedures by default. Many are used for database administration. Typing the name of a system stored procedure in a query window and pressing F1 will get help on the procedure. Right-clicking on the procedure in the Object Explorer and selecting Modify will reveal the procedure code. Such procedures include SP columns, SP help, SP server info, etc. Here we go. An example, system stored procedure. Exec SP columns patients. And since we're in lab, why don't we try it? The hat is giving me a headache. There we go. What is a password? Nothing but a miserable little pile of secrets. No Castlevania fans out there? At least one, there we go. Alright. Some apps take a moment to open. A colleague of mine is setting up a virtual machine for us, but the virtual machine is going to end up being like 20 gigabytes, because that's as small as you can make a Windows VM.
Compare that to the storage space of certain video games, I think it's fine.
Well, have to reset the whole thing, or?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. Boiling with rage right now.
Yeah. I have to reset the computer.
It's also somewhat embarrassing that this is the 2019 version. You know?
Mr. Moore, do you play any instruments?
I play the dulcimer, but I'm not very good. It's actually it's a Seagull Merlin, but a dulcimer is like a 3-string guitar, except one of the strings is actually 2 strings.
Oh,
In DAD tuning. So like, it's very easy to play and get into because like, basically the thing can only be tuned to one key, right? Which means that you're playing everything in the same key, so it's not nearly as flexible as something like a guitar, but it's much easier to pick up and play than a guitar, which is perfect for me because I'm not very good. Yeah, like it doesn't have frets for semitones, so, and it sounds kind of twangy, you know? So we are connected. We have CHDD. All right, let's do a new file. Make this a JavaScript. Ooh. And how do you just do a script again? New query. There we go. Blah. All right. There we go. So, there we go. So, exec, SP, column. You can see, so the autocomplete is giving you a list of all of the stored procedures that this particular one makes available. SP columns, there we go. Patience. By the way, this is what the slide is considering a command line argument. Again, I'm not sure I would agree with that terminology. It looks like just passing a value to me, but so it goes. There we go. Execute. There you go. And you can see that we get various pieces of data about the column. Data type, type name, what's the precision, like this is a varchar 50. If you needed to look that up, and you didn't have a database management system, I guess, where you could just look at the table. But, there you go. Let's try the next one. Exec, SP, columns, at table underscore name is equal to patience. There we go. This seems to have given me the same data. Very good. 2 ways to say the same thing. Love it. ASP help patients. Let's comment these out now, we don't need them. There you go. Various pieces of information. So you can see that under the help procedure, that procedure stores several select statements, right? Although I would say I'm not quite sure this looks like any kind of help lookup that I've ever seen before. It tells you what the constraints are, right? SP server info. So the point here, the point of these two lines is that the exact keyword is unnecessary. If you just state the name of the stored procedure, it will execute. Okay? Any questions? Okay, good. Moving swiftly on. A stored procedure consists of a procedure name, a set of optional parameters, and a routine body. Here is an example. Increase and vendor are hard-coded and not very flexible. So, create procedure, update items, item cost, as update items, set item cost equals item cost times, 1.5. Why would you say 1 plus, why couldn't you just say 1.25? So, where primary vendor ID is equal to 1. Here, you can see we are basically aliasing a query as a procedure, right? Let's see, am I going to be able to copy pasta? And then do the code that runs it. Commands completed successfully, huh? Okay. So once you've put it in the database, the procedure, you don't need to put it in the database again. There we go. So you can see, well, at the back you can't see, but I'll just describe it to you. If we take a look at the state of the items table before the procedure, item cost is 10, 7.49, etc. After, it's 12.5, 9.36, etc. So, there you go. We have taken an SQL statement and we have called it a procedure, and we can call it by its name. Make sense? So far, so good?
Yes.
Wonderful! So, here, a modification of the previous procedure. Notice here we are complaining about vendor, the amount of the increase and the vendor ID being hard-coded, right? We are only applying this update to vendor 1, we are only applying this much update. Alright, we're only applying that much of a change. I can see why. So, you know how PHP is annoying because all of the variables start with a $? TSQL is annoying because all of the variables start with an @ symbol, apropos of nothing. So, when it says @increase, that is a variable. It is a decimal number. Yeah, I don't know what that function does actually, I have to look it up. It's a number anyway. And then, oh, that's the data type. Right. So, and then vendor ID is an integer. So these are the parameters that go in, right? If we take a look at how this is now used, update items costs, we now pass in 0.25 and we pass in the vendor ID. So we have parameterized the increase amount and which vendor ID to apply it to. Which, you know, we've gone from having a function to having a function with parameters. Any questions? Very good. You guys want to see that one demonstrated? Okay. So, the alter, oh my goodness, what did I do? There we go. Alter procedure updates an existing procedure. Create procedure creates a new one. Execute. There we go. Now, before our update, our urinary drainage bag costs, wow, like $12,000, and now it costs nearly $16,000.
Is this American healthcare?
No, actually, what I think has happened is this particular example has been run, the database, who knows how many offerings of this course this has been on this computer. So this is what you get when this query has been run, for many semesters running, probably. So yeah. But you can see we can provide different values in this way. One note on the syntax. If you provide the values without telling us what parameters they correspond to, it works the same way that it does in Java. It just maps them positionally. You can also specify things out of order by specifying the names of the parameters explicitly. This is something that you can also do in JavaScript and Python, by the way. Any questions? Yes.
Are you able to also set default values for something like this?
I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me though. Normally a system like this does allow that.
So would we do it at the alter procedures, or would you?
I would presume it would go in here, yeah. If I had to guess, vendor int 5 or equals 5 probably. But I don't have time to look it up. Oh man. So, oh boy, they're starting to get long. This is an addition. This one allows a conditional update and defaults to no update. So. We add an additional parameter called update, which is set to either 0 or 1, because apparently Booleans aren't a thing. We then have an if statement. If update is equal to 1, we get the SQL query performing an update. But if update is set to 0, we just get a select query, where the difference is applied, but the table isn't updated. Make sense? Questions?
So that is an example of default value.
Yes. Oh, actually, yes. Right there. Ha! I was right. Yeah. So the default value for update is 0. There we go. Thank you. So, example 4. Fourth parameter will be returned to caller with number of rows affected. This version also makes use of a database cursor. We'll talk more about that later. Number of records, specified as an integer, but also specified as an output. So this is how we're handling, it's all well and good to be able to write a function, but how do you return something, right? You must declare the variable that you are returning up front and specify it as output. Isn't this a weird system? This is weird. I don't like it. Yeah, okay, right, good. So, some language semantics for you. Let me lay these hot semantics on your plate. In order to declare a variable, you declare a variable with a type. So the way that you declare a variable is using the word declare. SQL does not care about verbosity. So,
I like how they kind of doubled it on it, so now you've got declare and you also have to do the at symbol.
yes. Yeah, it's not even sufficient that I know this is a variable because it's got the at symbol, right? But yes. So what do we use local variables for? Calculations. Stop the presses. Assignment to output parameters. Sure. Assignment to columns for database updates. Sure. Once you've calculated something, you can use it places. As input parameters passed by calling programs, if you want to pass more data into further procedure calls. And error handling. So how do you set values in variables? You use the set keyword. Not sufficient to say record count is equal to record count plus 1. This is not good enough for TSQL. You must tell TSQL that you are performing assignment. Everybody knows how assignment works, right? Okay. Anybody put their hands up, I would have been disappointed. And then I would have explained assignment anyways. Conditionals.
This is a very necessary slide.
Yes. Ifs and else ifs. this way called if else. So, if statements test simple conditions, yes. Here's an explanation of an if statement for you, apropos of nothing. Here's an example of an if statement. So, if is capitalized, but of course these are keywords, right? So they doesn't actually have to be capitalized. Basically, the predicates that you've been using up to now in select statements, it's the same set of operators, right? Single equals means test of equality, and it means assignment in different contexts. So, let me ask you a question. Do you appreciate double equals now? Right? Because this is the alternative. If else, if not this, do that. Very good. Any questions about if else? Good. So, rather than having curly braces, you have
This is the worst, this is the worst.
begin and end. Yes. I mean, it's not as bad as Bash. Do you want to know? You want to know what closes an if block in Bash?
Yes, but I'm not gonna like the answer probably.
Fit. Fit.
Fit.
If backwards.
Oh.
But why?
What?
Yes.
Fine.
Yeah. If and conditions in Bash have to have two square braces. And I think then fit.
Thanks, I hate it.
Thanks, I
Who invented Bash?
A lot of people. Bash is like an ad hoc language that was made in collaboration with a lot of people, and it shows. But it is also kind of like the most useful programming language in my opinion. It's like, you know how to write a program, but can you write a program that uses programs? That's Bash, right? Bash is actually like the 5th most used programming language according to Stack Overflow developer survey. So, but this isn't about Bash. But yeah, instead of curly braces you get begin and end, which I believe is actually Fortran. I think Fortran does the same thing. I know that MATLAB M files do the same thing. See? This is the world you could have. This is the world you live in.
Visual Basic also does the same thing. It's bad.
Yep.
But you also have to say end sub. You have to say subroutine and then end subroutine.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Actually, there's one thing that I kind of like, mad respect to anybody who does this with comments. I find it's very, although I personally rarely do this, I find it's very useful if you're using a language where the functions or methods get quite long. A comment on the last closing curly brace and function name, that actually is quite good, because then you can visually tell, like, where does this function end? It's like, oh, that's the end of this function. Okay, good. It's quite useful. Some languages build that in as part of the syntax, some of the more obscure ones, but and even in those languages, it's often optional. But it's just like, you know, I suppose like with editors with code folding, you don't necessarily need to use it. How many people actually use code folding? How many people know what I'm talking about? So, code folding, in like VS Code or other similar editors, there will be a line along one side that has little plus signs, right? If you click on those, it takes like a function definition, collapses it to one line. That's, the code is folded up into one line. So you can like, it basically just, like what you're looking at is nice and clean and only the function definitions, like definition lines are presented, unless you need to go into the function and you can pop it open, do some stuff, close it back up again. That's useful too. Yeah, so I recommend using code folding if your editor supports it. So anyway, nested if statements. Did you guys know you can nest if statements?
You know, I kind of get what you meant when you said that you can take this course without having taken programming fundamentals.
No, it's still required for now.
This course doesn't. This course has no prerequisites, which means that you can fail Python badly and still take this course. While loops. Okay, so I should explain the double thing here. These are like special variables, not your defined variables. These are special variables. While loops. Do you get anything more complicated than a while loop? Let's take a look at our keywords. But you probably already know the answer.
Roll back.
Wait for it.
Roll back, error. Okay, yeah, error, I know, but
Wait for, I think, is like a, I don't think that's actually in the slides. I think it's a, like a sleep, like sleep in Java, maybe.
Thought it might have been a do while or something.
How about this one? Razor.
I suppose it's like when Java and C# you put throw new exception or something.
Yeah. But it's just kind of funny because like there should be two E's there.
Well, yeah. Roll back. That's the one that I don't.
Where's for? Is there any for here?
Oh no.
There's no for loops.
Ooh.
Yeah. Whoever said that was a good reaction. There's while, and that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, for this language, oh right, it's Microsoft.
Well, it's I'm not sure if I could actually lay this one at Microsoft's feet. This is like, it's not meant to do real programming, right? Like, understand that this is a bad language because it doesn't have to be a good language, because if you need a good language, use a good language. This is not meant for heavy-duty programming.
It's just kind of like built onto the side of something, I guess.
Yeah, like what this is this is a small amount of slightly procedural stuff that you can do bolted onto the side of the query language, right?
Is the designs for comments?
Oh, no, that's, you'll find this as I actually use this terminology as well. That means insert here, right? This is not part of the language. This is like, you do your loop processing here. It actually, that notation comes from a language which is a meta language used to describe programming languages called extended Bacchus-Naur form, which is not something that you should ever have to know because you're in college. I shouldn't have to know it, but I did a PhD. EBNF. It's a language for describing programming languages. This is actually a programmed version of it, but
A language to describe programming language.
yeah, it's kind of slightly similar to a regular expression. But anyway, yeah. Get on, we only have 8 minutes left. You guys know what a break statement does? You guys know what a continue statement does?
What do you think continue statement do?
It just starts you back at the next loop iteration.
Oh, okay.
So it's like, both break and continue are like relabeled go-tos. Break is go to end of loop. Continue is go to loop condition.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I actually didn't know that.
Well, I mean, it's, unless you understand all of these control flow structures as like really being aliases for clumps of go-tos, there's no reason to think in terms of go-tos, right?
Yeah.
Deleting procedures, you drop them, just like everybody wants to drop them right now. Data dictionary for table procedures. Every create procedure statement generates entries in system.procedures and system.sql modules. That is a way to say that procedures are stored in the database, right? It is the database itself that stores it, not the query, right? The query is not recompiled every time, right? This is how it works. This is how it works. You write the query which produces the procedure. At the time you execute the query, that compiles the procedure. The compiled procedure is stored in the database. Okay? Yes?
Is it dropped after we close the?
No, it's persistent. Yeah. That's kind of the whole point. The procedure is persistent until either the database is destroyed or a drop procedure statement is activated. Like the data in the tables is persistent. It's the same sort of persistence.
I'm shocked.
It's not like a view.
No, it's not like a view. It's not recomputed. Yeah, it's compiled once and that's it.
I'm shocked that these procedures are stored.
Well, I mean, they are called stored procedures, right?
Same energy as like, we some kind of suicide squad.
Man, how many slides do we have left to go?
Not really there.
Oh man, only 2. Oh, we can do this! We can do this! Alright, cursors. Cursors are used to access select results one row at a time. I almost don't even care to cover this here because we're going to get a much better treatment of this in PHP. Because this is the same way that PHP works. So basically, a cursor, you can think of it as its own little command prompt. All right? It's a little command prompt inside of the language. You send a query into it. It calculates the results and it stores it in the cursor. You can then retrieve results from the cursor one line at a time or all at once, however you wish. But this answers the question, how do I loop over select query results? Right? Select query, you get a table. Maybe I want to do like something for each row in the table. You store the results of the select query in a cursor, and then the cursor feeds you those rows one at a time. Does that make sense?
Oh,
Good.
Like a for each loop.
Yeah, it's
So every time that you
starting to
call
get kind of like a for each loop. Yeah.
every time that you call it, will just give you one row. And it's going from first row, second row, third row.
Precisely. Yeah. Now you need. It's the procedure for cursors is a little bit like file I/O, right? You have to declare the cursor and provide it the select statement. You then open the cursor. This executes the select statement. We're going to see in PHP that there's actually the procedure we use in PHP to do the same thing, very similar to this. We then fetch one row at a time from the result set into variables. when we're finished that, we close the cursor and deallocate it.
I was gonna say, it sounds a lot like StreamReader, where you just open it and read it line by line, and each line you stick in the variable. rather
It
than
is,
right away.
yeah, it is a stream reading. It's just, it is precisely and exactly that. The only difference is, it's not a file in the file system, right? It's the results of a select query. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. So at fetch status, if we go back a bit, you'll see this guy show up here. While fetch status is equal to 0, the fetch status tells us where are we in the cursor. Was the last fetch statement successful? Yes or no? If you get a -1 for this value, the fetch statement failed because the row was beyond the result set. That is to say, I ran out of rows. -2, the row fetched is missing. So I don't know what situation would result in that. But basically, if it's not 0, you should stop the loop, right? So, there you go. Summary. That wasn't too bad, actually. It's a horrible language. Yeah. Any questions?
So that at fetch, is the first at like a variable declaration of like another?
You mean this guy?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think of these as separate operators. I would think of this as referring to a different class of variables that are given predefined values. I would think of that, if I were you, the nearest mental approximation to this should be the use of underscore and double underscore in Python, which I don't think they really get into with you guys. Well, I have some things I can show you about Python.
But
I know class is over, but if you guys are interested.
So that fetch status though, is that like a system variable that you call?
A system variable is a good way to put it.
So we don't have to like create it ourselves, it's already there.
You do not have, you create it when you create the cursor. Yeah. Very good. All right. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy yourselves tomorrow.